Are you gonna shoot the questions? Yeah, are we ready? Are we on?
Hello, welcome to Different Perspectives. I'm Paul Ndiho in Washington. Kenya is mourning the passing of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who died at age 80 while receiving medical treatment in India. For more than 4 decades, Raila stood at the heart of Kenya's political story, a freedom fighter, a reformist, and one of the most consequential figures in the country's democratic evolution. Today, we take a closer look at his life, his legacy, and the controversies that defined his remarkable career. Joining me from Nairobi, Kenya, is David Ohito, a journalist who for many years covered and closely followed Raila Odinga's political journey. And from Washington is my former colleague, Vincent Makori, a veteran journalist. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to you both.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Well, thank you for having me, Paul.
Together, we'll reflect on the impact Raila Odinga had on Kenya's politics, his enduring influence across Africa, and the question of who might be the next kingpin of Nyanza province. Gentlemen, let's start with you, David. Maybe set the stage for us. You covered Raila for many years. You are a very close ally of his. Set the stage for us. Maybe tell us what the mood is like where you are.
Hello, yeah. Thank you very much for having me, and it's nice to see my colleague and peer Vincent Makori on the set with us. I would want to say I covered Raila Odinga for about 24 uninterrupted years as a journalist with the Standard Media Group, where I was a cub reporter rising to the ranks of news editor and also appearing on commentary shows for the sister TV station KTN. And I would say one of the most colorful politicians in my career, spanning over 30 years to cover as a politician. A very straight-talking, honest man who would confound both friend and foe whenever he opened his lips. There are moments he would take a back seat, and whenever he was there in the back seat, people would say, "Where is Raila Odinga?" And when he emerged, of course, as a newsman or a news person, you knew you have a headline because he was a foremost news source across Kenya who spanned the East Africa and the entire African continent. A very amiable person, very lovable character, who never shied from controversy any day. You could ask him any question and he would answer. And he would educate you on the history of the politics of this country with very great detailed memory lanes, reminding you of how we fought for independence, the struggles within the independence, the first struggle of the first 10 years of governance since independence, the KANU regime under President Daniel Arap Moi, and the fight for democracy and liberation. He would tell you in tones how they were betrayed, how he spent his time in jail, and he also has the record of being Kenya's longest detainee for 8.5 years. He was behind bars, yet he survived that, and when he was released, he became one of the biggest political figures in the country, defining the politics of each regime until he breathed his last this morning. Thank you.
How about you, Vincent? You've covered Raila Odinga for many years. You and I used to have conversations about Raila as a comeback kid almost every other election cycle. Your thoughts and memories of Raila Odinga?
Yes, and me and Raila have been around each other in terms of our job as journalists, covering him closely, sometimes from close range and sometimes from a distance, about the same time as my peer David, who we happen to have gone to college together. So one of the things I want to say is that Raila Odinga will be remembered as the most consequential politician in the Kenyan political landscape. If you can trace back to the agitation for change, for opening up the space for more participation, however far back you go, the one enduring person, the one enduring personality will be Raila Odinga, right from the detention days to all the protests that he has led over the years. But even more importantly, and we may expand a bit further on this, I say Raila Odinga has to be, must, and will be credited to a large extent for what Kenya is today in terms of the new constitutional dispensation that has transformed Kenya to where it is today after many, many years of a single party rule with an archaic colonial constitution. He was one of the most consequential person in terms of pushing for a new constitution, which has literally transformed the way Kenyans do business, transformed how the Kenyan nation is managed and governed. So that, for me, is one of the most significant thing about it. But also, one other thing that I think I can borrow from a former Vice President Amolo, who was also a member of of the same party with him at some point. I think he did say that Raila Odinga elicited two things: you either uh, disliked him so intensely, or you loved him so passionately. Those who love him would die for him. Those who did not like him, sometimes they went to the extreme, and many a times they would not tell you why they held those kind of intense feelings of dislike, because also there was a level of which Raila Odinga was a very enigmatic figure. Some people knew him, understood him. Other people never could really tell what to make of Raila Odinga. But whichever way you look at it, when Kenya's history will be written eventually for posterity, Raila Odinga will occupy so many chapters of that history book.
Interesting perspectives from both of you. What made him such an enduring force of nature? Sometimes a very divisive one, but in Kenya's arena, he was such a politician that you could not escape.
Is that to me or David?
Any one of you can take it up. Yeah.
David first.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the core things that made Raila amiable to the populace is that he was such a people-driven politician. He was never, kind of confined by the trappings of power that he enjoyed, even when he was in the high office of the prime minister. He would walk the streets. I remember when I was bureau chief in Kisumu, there were no mobile phones. He would call the landline in office and tip me that today I want to take a walk to the Kibuye market, open air market, and listen to old mamas. What are they saying and what do they need done? And I would have what I would call the privilege of being with him in very rare conditions. He would tell me, if you have a car, come and pick me, so that people do not, because people will follow me. I don't want very many people to follow me when I use my official car. And he would drive in my car, we'd stop somewhere and simply take a walk through the market. He would sit down and take a calabash of porridge and his favorite boiled maize, or corn as you call it in the US. And he would listen to all the women, and they would tell him what their challenges of life were in Kenya and what they needed change, the cost of living, the release of political prisoners, and the opening of democratic space, And then he would later on call a presser to say the people have spoken to him, the people have sent him to say A, B, C, D, and that is how he became relevant. And I think I agree with Vincent, my brother, that one politician who really understood Raila Odinga best was Amolo Kijana. Amolo would say that in any political scenario, whenever you had Raila in the camp, you had better have him in your camp peeing outside than him outside peeing on you. You'd be in a lot of trouble. He would describe him like a rhino who would charge at you, and despite how mighty you are, you'd really go down. And that is what made Raila really resonate with the people. When he met children, he would carry children and talk to them like they're his own kids or grandchildren. And that make him get loved across board, the high and mighty. And then Raila developed this characteristic of having a think tank, normally carrying lots of politicians with lots of experience in the country's politics, academicians who would tell him this has happened in this country, this is how to approach it. The think tank really defined his politics for a very long time. And whenever they said, no, you're taking the wrong trajectory, I will take a back seat or recoil himself and return rebranded better and stronger. And that defined the critical moment in his political career when he decided that he would beat Kanu by joining the party. And his strategy was to go inside the party, learn the ropes, be bosom friends with President Moi and Kanu then, but watch this space. Whenever he left, Kanu has never been the same and has been going down the graph until today. That is Raila Odinga for you.
You know, Vincent, you used to talk about how Raila Odinga was a political force of nature. You used to talk about how, for example, he had this ability to mobilize and bring people together. From every politician that you can talk about in Kenya, Raila has, in a way, held on to their hand. Even the current president right now. Uh, what made him such like a magnet? His ability to attract all these people, whether it was politicians, whether it was everyday people. What made him uniquely, I guess, qualified to do that?
Yeah. So first, if I may, just piggyback on what David said about his down-to-earth kind of disposition. Raila Odinga was always a person who can reach out to anybody and does not feel that he's so, superior to anybody. I remember even when he would come to Washington, sometimes he came to our offices and we would sit on the table and have soda just like anybody else, without pretense. Raila Odinga did not pretend to come low down, down low to where the people are, as if, to win some political, goals. But no, he was very genuine about it, and I think that made it very attractive to people. But talking about how he managed to get at the end of the day close to all those politicians who at some point were, appearing to be foes of him. He did a handshake with President Moi, Daniel Arap Moi. He had a handshake with, of course, Mwai Kibaki. There was a handshake with Uhuru Kenyatta, a handshake with William Ruto, the current president. One of the things you have to realize is that in all my years of trying to understand Raila never held a grudge to begin with against anybody. Raila never stayed bitter. Raila would actually make up with anybody who may have called him the worst names on earth, who may even have wanted to kill him. He had kind of he believed that everything had its time. Yesterday we were fighting, today we can shake hands and move forward and forget the past. So his capacity to forgive, forget, and move forward helped him actually to reach out to people who, in just a few years or a few months ago, a few weeks ago, were breathing fire down on him, or were even appearing to want to lock him out of the system entirely, made him, easily reconcile and find himself again sitting at the same table with these people. To
Uh,
many people's confusion, actually, Raila Odinga has managed to be part of the political systems since Moi's time up to today, despite all those presidents having been very, very strongly, against him, critical of him, even accusing him of being a person who is a troublemaker who comes in and causes all this trouble. But somehow they find ways to open the doors for him, and he gets to join them on the table.
David, take us back, since you've followed him very closely, take us back to the 1980s. How significant was his arrest and the prison trial following, I think, the 1982 coup where he almost lost his life? No?
Yeah. I think my first interaction with Raila, I was a student leader at Moi University I joined in 1990, and shortly after joining, the late Robert Ohito died, and at that time he was still in jail, so he did not have much impact on that. But in between, I think 2 years later, he was released, and 1.5 years later, he was released. I think that was in 1991, and he started making his political moves. So as students, of course, with hot politics in our heads, we decided to invite him to come to a political rally within the university, and that caused a lot of chaos for us. We were detained a little, but they made sure that all roadblocks were blocked so that Raila could not travel from Nairobi to Eldoret. But that aside, he had this power to galvanize political thoughts and socialize them towards his ideas, and that endeared him to politicians more. At that time, remember, we were at the height of Kanu stalwartism, and we had very prominent senior politicians from Luo Nyanza, from Western Kenya, who were sworn enemies of the father of Raila, Jaramogi, and also sworn enemies of Raila. In their statements, they became relevant politically by attacking Raila. In fact, the easiest way to get a political appointment was to make a public statement against Raila Odinga and his father. Then the next day, you'll be rewarded with a political post, appointments, and so on. And this went against the grain of the masses who really supported his ideas and stood with him as a rights activist. He wanted freedom. He wanted detention without trial to be banned, saying he had been one of the worst victims of that in Kenya. And so when they wanted political pluralism, and there was fight for political change. As at 1991, 92, as we are heading to the election, Raila was barely in top 10 political figures of the country. At that time, his father was still there, very strong, and had very strong generals around him, the likes of James Orengo, the likes of Professor Umamuga, the late Professor Umamuga, the likes of Anyang' Nyong'o, the likes of Oki or Kombaka. We had the coastal team that had very solid politicians. We had Muhisa Kituis, we had George Captain, we had Masinde Muliro. He was not, I would say, confidently, by 1990, 1991, Raila was not even the top 20 rank of and file of top politicians in Kenya. But he kept on fighting on. And I think the biggest turning point was when now the old man rested in 1994, January. And, without being even in the top 5 ranks of old Kenya, he decided to chart his own political path. Very abrasive at that time. He would hold rallies even against police orders. He would storm political meetings. He would defend the landless, would fight provincial administration, and that kept on endearing him as a hero that was defending the rights, the injustices against ordinary people. And that is how he started galvanizing support time and again. So he became a politician that would largely identify with freedom fighters. And you could see from the eulogies today, those who fought alongside him, you know, I was a very daring politician. He would say, we are going to hold a rally in a public place, with or without police permits. And he would mobilize youth who were ready to die for him. And he would go and do it.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point. When I was doing research for this show, I was reading about his father, Jaramogi Odinga, how basically it's almost like he handed over the baton to his son, and the son would end up becoming this force of nature that any politician admires in Kenya. I mean, Vincent, I remember you and I covering in 2018 when he declared himself as president. Just to David's point, I remember he said, without permission, I'll do it. And he went ahead and did it,
Yes.
right? So maybe take us back, just give us a little bit of what really made him want to challenge power. What was, that thing that pushed him to defy the odds?
Yeah. Raila Odinga was not the most gifted in the oratory skills, you may say. I mean, when he spoke, he has this soft voice, but the power of his words is just unbelievable. He's one man who had you would say he was fearless. Let me say, Raila Odinga was a fearless person. He was not afraid of death, you could say. He dared death in many instances, perhaps because he had already gone through so much torture himself. But he was a courageous man. I mean, talk about after his father died. Remember, they used to have a party called Ford, and Ford was the party of his father and all the other political luminaries. They've been mentioned right here by David. But Raila was not going to be um, any second to somebody. Yeah, he decided he's going to go it alone, and that's how ended up forming a new political party. But that party ended up being way bigger than the party of his father, Ford. So he had this courage, he had charisma, and also he's a person who knew how to network, how to reach out to significant politicians across the country. And whenever he formed a coalition, he formed a very formidable coalition because he had a way of reaching out to some of the most powerful politicians across the country. So going back even to when he decided that whether they declare him the winner or not, he's going to declare himself the president. One of the things is that Raila Odinga always had a plan, always knew what he's doing, and it does not necessarily mean that people understood whether Raila actually believed that he was going to become the president by being declared at Uhuru Park, that is the president of Kenya, being sworn in. But one of the things that maybe David may know better is that there were those plans that Raila would put on the table for everybody to see. Raila always had a secret weapon. He always had something else that people would not understand. And so whatever action he took, there was an end to that action that sometimes others outside will not understand. And so if you look back, every move he has made has led to those in authority actually kind of reaching out to him or accepting to sit down with him. He has, over the years, used the power of his influence, the power of his charisma, the power of his following to actually force the authorities to the table to sit down and negotiate. So whether he decided to declare himself the president and whatever that was supposed to achieve, he did achieve. He didn't become the president, but somewhere along the way, because of that gesture, because of how he displayed to the country, to the authority, to everybody who was looking that he has this kind of following in Kenya. He has this power. He has the capacity to actually paralyze the country if he wanted to. It forced whoever was in power at that time to come to the table so that you can negotiate about the best way to move the country forward.
Great point. David, you probably covered some of these stories. For example, the coalition government with Mwai Kibaki, the handshake with Uhuru Kenyatta. You could also argue the handshake with Ruto. I remember when Ruto was campaigning, he said he was not going to talk to him. But later on, they became even closer. Most recently, he actually supported him to vie for the African Union seat. So, what could have led to those kinds of discussions since you were like very close to him? What went on behind the scenes?
Raila had a very powerful consultative process. And he was a very open guy. He would call us in the media and ask me, what do you think would happen if I did ABCD? And I would give my inputs. And on condition that you give me that story first, when it so happens. And handshake did not start with Mwai Kibaki. First handshake was in, I think that was 1991. When he and his party, National Development Party, NDP, then crossed and did a merger with KANU. Moi was the president, very strong with very political network spread across the country. He had the likes of George Saitoti, he had the likes of J.J. Kamodo, who would call KANU stalwarts, and that really gave KANU the power. So the moment Moi managed to convince Raila to be on board, he demanded that they must be in the party structure. And remember, he was rewarded with the Secretary General of the party at a public rally in Kisumu, and by delegates of KANU who had been living by attacking him all the day, every day. So that was his first instant of handshake. But one time I remember interviewing and asked him, why did you join KANU? He said KANU had been built over years and had laid very solid foundations that you needed to know the corners, the nuances, the infrastructure, the architecture of the party before you can confront them, because they had done it twice. In the 92 elections failed, they repeated the same 97 elections and failed. And remember, in both 92 and 97 elections, Moi was winning with barely 30% of the votes. The entire opposition would get up to 65, 69% of the votes, but they had one failing: they would not back one candidate. So his think tank, his advisors told him the best way moving, learn the tricks, let these guys be too close. When the time comes, let's pull the plug. That's what he did. When Moi brought in Uhuru Kenyatta, who had been in diaspora, could hardly name 4 or 5 constituencies, nor 3 districts in the country, and endorsed him as the preferred presidential candidate, that caused a lot of uproar within the senior KANU ranks. And Raila said, you cannot give us a child who does not even know how to breastfeed to be our leader. This is, a smack on our face, and we are not going to take it lying low. And he led revolts outside KANU. At that time, the opposition had built alliances around Mwai Kibaki, who had run for twice and been beaten by Moi. And there was Kijana Amolo also, and then there was Charity Ngilu. And Raila joined the team. And when he joined the team, that is when the so-called consequential decision of handshake happened. He was, they coined the Rainbow Coalition and delivered the solid votes for Mwai Kibaki, who then beat Uhuru Kenyatta hands down. But remember, in the run-up to the 2002 elections, Mwai Kibaki had gotten a bad road accident and could no longer campaign. So he traveled to London for treatment. And Raila single-handedly led the campaigns and, telling the team, let's look at it like football. The captain is injured, but we have spare players who we can put in the team and we still play and deliver the prime prize. And that is how he rallied the campaigns and became the darling of Kenyans across all political divides, not relying on his tribes people only, but becoming a darling of all Kenyans from the coast, from western, from central. He built diehards who believed in him. He built networks of people who believed in him. I know so many people, even now in central Kenya, where he did not get very many votes in the last election, but who are Raila diehards. That is Raila Odinga for you. He said, if Nelson Mandela could appoint de Klerk, his deputy, who am I, just 8.5 years in prison, to deny Moi a handshake and working with him? He is a man who, built friends, dumped friends, built them again, and brought them to the table when it mattered most, even to save the nation, as he did during the Gen Z protests. That is how I would summarize the same.
Interesting.
Yes, I just wanted to add and maybe go back a little bit at the risk of repeating what David has said. When Raila Odinga decided to merge with KANU, I was in Germany, and I remember calling him. That time he had been appointed initially as a minister, I think, of public works. And I asked him, Honorable Raila Odinga, I think this is a very risky move you've made. And he said, Vincent, I have plan B and I have plan C also. And at that time, I didn't understand what he meant. He said, it may look stupid, but I have plan B and I have plan C. So, knowing what happened thereafter, as David has just, clearly elaborated, Raila was a master strategist. Raila was like a giraffe. When he was working on his strategy, he was seeing farther than any of the people around him, any of the people he was making deals with could see. He had strategies that sometimes even some of the people closest to him could not understand. That's why every move he has made has baffled people, has always caught people by, or flat-footed. So confused initially, they just can't understand why he's doing this, and then over time you kind of come to see the sense of what he has done. So that is one of the other things that he'll always be credited with. He always had a strategy. He had a secret card that nobody would know, and when he pulled it, everybody was confused. He always knew what he wants to do. He always knew where he wanted to go, and that is what he did to Moi. When Moi played that game on him and presented Uhuru Kenyatta at Kasarani Stadium, and everybody was like, "Oh, this was bound to happen." That's what some people thought. This was bound to happen anyway. Now look at Raila; he has no political party. Because actually, when I talked to him, I said, "You're like a person who has been asked to burn your house and get into your enemy's house. So what happens when he kicks you out tomorrow?" And actually, that's how it looked like. He is a homeless person now, but you know what he did? He left KANU with who was who in KANU. He essentially killed the ruling party. Up to today, KANU is a very insignificant political party in Kenya. When you remember how it was, like everything in Kenya, everything was about KANU. So Raila always had a strategy that nobody could understand, except maybe a few people right close to him. But even his closest enemies could never guess where he's heading with a particular move. But he always knew where he's going, and nobody can match his capacity to strategize for the long term and to surprise friends and foes alike.
That's why he's such a consequential leader of our time. In case you are just joining us, we are talking about Kenya mourning the passing of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who passed away at age 80 while receiving medical treatment in India. For more than 40 years, Raila stood at the heart of Kenya's political story, a freedom fighter, a reformist, and one of the most consequential figures in the country's democratic process. And my guests are from Nairobi, Kenya, David Ohito, a veteran journalist who for many years covered and closely followed Raila Odinga. And right here in Washington, D.C., I'm joined by my former colleague, Vincent Makori, a veteran journalist, both of them weighing on the passing of veteran, politician Raila Amolo Odinga. Now, let's talk about the big picture. Now that he's out of the picture, who becomes the next kingpin? Obviously for Nyanza, but across the country, almost every other politician. You look at the Senate, you look at Parliament, you look at even the presidency. All those guys somehow were nurtured by Raila Odinga. So who is going to take over from him? Any one of you can take on that one.
David?
I'll go first, Vincent. Thank you very much. I just want to put record straight. When Jaramogi Oginga Odinga died in January 1994, it wasn't like, typical royalty inheritance that Raila popped up on the scene or was handed the baton of leadership. He fought for his own space, and I remind always the audiences that at the time of the death of Jaramogi Odinga, Raila was not as close to Jaramogi as some of his stalwart politicians like James Orengo, Anyang' Nyong'o, Professor Muamoga, Okiombaka, who were very close to him, Paul Muite, John Hamino, I named them. And I know of so many meetings that Raila would hold out, Jaramogi would hold without even inviting Raila, only to tell him of the course later on. From then on, he built his own political empire, and even abandoned his own father's party to found the NDP and LDP later on, and up to the Orange Democratic Movement. He had a course that he had charted, and in that space, he involved himself. Yes, he may have had the trappings of power of being the son of a former vice president, a son of a political dynasty, but that had very little political influence in what Raila did. But I know for sure he built networks that relied on from those loyalists of his dad. So how this unfolds from here, I think I've seen so many people saying the specialists, very close loyalists, very good supporters who have been with him, that we are happy Muzee is leaving us with a legacy that he has died when we are in government. All along, he wanted to enjoy power as the president of the Republic of Kenya. When he failed to do so, through the ballot, he decided to patch up relationships. And I can assure you, as it stands, his political backyard will stand to the man, if I'm not wrong, with William Ruto, and it all depends on how Ruto reciprocates that kind of gesture. I know there are 2 cabinet secretaries, let me say 3, if you add the Attorney General from that part of the world, but Raila's political influence transcended beyond Luo Nyanza. He had a very bigger political influence in Western Province, where he's not beat even the big wigs like Mudavadi and so on in terms of the numbers of governors, in terms of numbers. For example, in Western Kenya with 4 counties, if you add Trans Nzoia, 5th county from Rift Valley, 3 of them are ODM governors. Busia County, of Polo Tuoma, you have Vihiga County, Dr. Tichilo, you've got Fernandez Baraza, Kakamega County. And that tells you how his influence transcended his backland of Siaya County or Nyanza province for that matter. He had lots of MPs outside the Nyanza in court. And that tells you he would not want to confine his politics to that small section where he was born, where his father is buried. But you can see the number of politicians, up to including Northern Kenya, where he had governors, MPs, and so on. So how this unfolds depends on how the politics is played. The key factor for me remains how Gen Zs register as voters. That might distort the traditional voting patterns going forward and might influence how kingpins emerge going forward.
Vincent,
Yeah.
despite to David's point, he talked about how he ran a couple times and never made it on the ballot. But despite running 5 times without success, Raila remained such an influential figure. What explains his resilience, his staying power, his ability to court all these former quote unquote enemies, and they will become allies? What
Yes.
influenced that?
Yeah. First you have to. I have to say that I think Raila has managed to be, in the last several years, almost a co-president in the succeeding Kenyan government in some way. He's so close to power that he was almost like a co-president during Uhuru Kenyatta's time, and even right now. So going back to why he has continued being this very influential person in the Kenya's political system. First, you have to talk about, I would call it, the terror of his support. Raila Odinga is a singular personality who has had a kind of a following that you cannot compare with any other. It's almost like I don't want to use words that may be perceived to be negative, but let me say like almost like a religious. Raila Odinga has had the most loyal, most faithful following, and it's huge in numbers, not only from his backyard in terms of ethnicity, but even across the country. Those who really believe in him, those who really love Raila, are so loyal to him that just the sheer numbers, the sheer support that he has, the kind of force of supporters he brings to the table, literally terrifies the political establishment. I don't think there's any politician who has managed to organize people the way Raila has been organizing people from the late 90s or even somewhere, let's say even the 2000s onwards, but even back then. Raila Odinga is the one person with that capacity to actually make any person in power want to figure out how to tame him or how to bring him closer, because he has shown and proved over and over that he had that ability. You have to look back at the elections that he has lost and the ones that he said he won, and look at how many people voted for Raila. I mean, literally, Raila lost those elections by a small margin. And when you consider that, even when he lost, even if you consider that he lost, the margin was so small, meaning that he had about half of the voters, close to half of the voters were always behind him, which proved that he had the capacity to actually, either if he wanted to go the negative way, to paralyze the country, if he wanted to go into the way of revolting and defying all kind of logic and doing what some people had wanted him to do, actually literally to go to go crazy and take over by force. So that was one of the reasons why anybody had to sit down and talk to Raila Odinga. I wanted to quickly mention something about what
Sure.
then happens quickly. I feel like Raila will leave a vacuum that nobody can fill in, at least in the next whatever few years that we know. Because there's nobody who has come closer to Raila. Nobody, not from Luo Nyanza, not anywhere in the country. Do we have anybody who comes close to him? So today, his followers will be left definitely like orphans to a large degree. There's so many great, people that he has built over the years, but none of them can even wear half of his one shoe, or even a quarter of his shoe. So that is for me might be a concern for those who are wondering how to move forward after all settles. When he is laid to rest, there might be a moment of reflection as to what then happens to the constituency that was Raila's constituency, both in Luo Nyanza and of course across the country.
You know, David, earlier I was talking to some people, and some people are very, like, for example, when he had this handshake with Uhuru Kenyatta, a lot of people were surprised. Even most recently, when he has reached out to President William Ruto, the same thing. A lot of people are surprised that this guy could actually reach out to these guys and say, "Hey, I want to work with you, President Ruto. I want to work with you, President Uhuru Kenyatta." Was it more of his political, was it style, or it was something that he did because he wanted to put a country ahead of party politics?
Let me say for the umpteenth time that Raila Odinga was a statesman par excellence. When the nation was facing a crossroad, he would emerge and try to define a course that would make us stable to remain the beacon of peace on the African continent. I remember asking him, they're accusing you of talking to enemies. But he tell me there are several ways of killing a cat. You can put it in a bag and stifle it, it will die. You can give it poison, it will die. It depends on what you want to achieve. And then he told me there's only one Kenya. If we let these people run over the stage and the military take over, we'll be like the many examples in West Africa. And that's why I came out to stand with President Ruto, restore constitutionalism, which I fought for. And that did not.
Hello, David? David, it looks like we lost you. David, are you still there? You're muted. David, you're muted. Unmute. Yeah, sorry.
I also want to add that Raila enjoyed what I call fanatical following. There are so many young people, so many ladies, so many men who would come out and identify with the cause that Raila identified with. And not because of anything, is one politician I never saw renting a crowd to support him. During campaigns, I would see people volunteer. I would see even old mothers just bring a bag of beans or a can of maize. This is for campaign teams. Once they have done this kind of campaign, let them have something to buy. And that kind of fanatical following would not be bought. It's something you cannot rent. He would say a thing, and it became like a resonating coincidence across Nyanza. I remember during the constitutional reforms, the people of Luo Nyanza said, we have seen the constitution, we've heard the experts, but if Baba had read it and Baba says the constitution is good, who are you to say it is wrong? And they would follow religiously to the person what Baba has said. No politician on this planet or this country has ever had that kind of following. and they would say then they are like volunteer soldiers of Raila Amolo Odinga. If he says they go left, they will go left. If they get into their ditch, they will sort themselves out then, but do not try and force them to find their own ways. It is such fanatical wave that he built around Kibaki, and he warned people. I remember the time he used at a funeral in Luanyaza saying, young people, all the people, a tsunami is coming to Kenya. It will sweep Kanu and it's all guts away. And true to his word, the tsunami swept politicians, even the strongest that ever lived, like Moi, aside.
How about those people, his critics? There are a lot of critics who did not like his style. There are people who said that, yes, he was this consequential leader of our time, but he had a lot of weaknesses. For example, there are times when he would shift alliances whenever it was politically expedient for him, from opposing to working with uh, some of his challengers. Some people saw that inconsistency as a negative thing. Some people saw it as maturity. What did you see since you worked very closely with him?
Um, is that for David?
You can weigh in as well.
Okay, I wanted to say that politics is politics, and I think somebody was it Machiavelli who said the end justifies
The
the
means.
means, and other politicians, other people have said politics is a dirty game. I think it would be too presumptuous to sanitize the game. The nature of politics is that there are parts of it that are ugly, and always depending on which side you stand, you see things from that prism. So for those who were on the other side, they do see certain things that were perceived from their perspective as negative on Raila's side. For example, when he made this overtures, or whether they were done behind the scenes, and eventually whether it was done from the other side when he did the handshakes, there are many people who would tell you he did not necessarily consult them, and so they didn't either understand the purpose of it. Some may have felt betrayed because they stood with him, they were ready to die for him. Some of the people died for him, and some felt that it was not appropriate to actually make up and have handshakes with those in power. So there are some of those people who felt betrayed. That's a fact. It's there. And some may say it, some may not say it. And of course, there are those who don't care whatever it means, but whatever he says, whatever he does, as David said, they had this fanatical following. They don't care. Whatever Baba says, we do. I remember talking to a lady. I was in Kenya for the election, and they said, if Baba tells me to leave my husband today, I will do so. So it doesn't matter whatever he said. So as I mentioned earlier, there are two ways to look at it. There are some who are critics of him, even within those supporting those who are supporters, and then of course there are those who are completely outside who do not like anything Raila does and see him as a self-serving. They may have seen him as a self-serving personality. Whenever he came to their political establishment, they always said he came to wreck it, he came to destroy it from inside. And whatever happened, some of it is beyond some of our comprehension, because I will always hold that there are some things in politics that happen that only those on the inside understand, and the people on the outside may never understand why certain moves were pulled. And that's the nature of politics. I don't think everything in politics is very clear, and also not very clean, not all the time. So I'm not in the game. Those who are in the game probably understand best how they played and why why they play the way they do.
We are almost done with our minutes. Let's see. Beyond Kenya, what legacy does Raila Odinga leave uh, behind, especially when you look at the African continent, you look at the politics that in the region? What kind of legacy does Raila leave behind?
I've lost my sound. I can't hear you so well, so I don't know what the problem is.
Okay, let's try to. David, are you still there? David, can you hear us?
I can't hear you. I have a problem with the mics. I can't hear you well.
Okay, let's see. Hello? David, can you hear us?
I have a problem with my sound. I can't hear. I can't hear.
Okay, I think you are not muted, but okay, Vincent, you want to take that up?
Yes.
I was saying that beyond the question was beyond Kenya. Raila obviously left this larger than life presence across the continent. Most recently, was vying to be the chairperson of the African Union. His style, his politics are revered, or his politics is revered across the continent.
Yes.
What kind of legacy does he leave behind?
Yeah, I think for especially some of those who have been in opposition politics, they definitely in a number of countries have learned from Raila Odinga, his organizing capabilities, and also his capacity to reconcile with his enemies. I think I was talking to somebody yesterday from the DRC, and I mean, of course, we didn't know Raila will be passing on, but he was talking to me about how he wishes the DRC to be like Kenya, in that the politicians from both sides can actually come together and reconcile even after bitter, bruising political campaigns. And that is, I think, something he brought to the political landscape that politicians in other countries may have learned, or now maybe in reflection, they may reflect on what kind of a person he was in his capacity to organize, how powerful and influential he was. But at the same time, how he seemed to put the country ahead of himself in terms of creating reconciliation so that there can be peace. Whereas in other countries, when a person realizes they have that kind of power, they would actually capitalize on that to either,
I've lost sound. I can't hear
lead
you anymore.
a complete revolution so that they can take over the power and possibly create instability, regardless of what that means to the rest of the citizens. We've seen those in other countries where people didn't care. They created chaos because they were disgruntled for not having won the elections. So Raila Odinga has been in cases where he felt like he obviously was denied a victory, swallowed his pride at some point, found his way somehow to go into the government, but in a more peaceful way by ensuring that the country stays intact and peaceful. So I think that will resonate across the continent in terms of what he will be remembered for in a number of countries. And we have also seen him being deployed to a number of countries. I think he went to Cote d'Ivoire at one point to help, the transition there. So he gained respect at the continental level, and that's why he was one of the candidates for the African Union chairmanship. Only that, of course, there are some other politics that go into all this. He didn't get it, but he's a recognizable figure across the continent.
It looks like David is having some technical challenges, and we have lost him. But maybe let's try to wrap this thing up.
Yes.
How can ordinary people remember? How can ordinary people remember Raila, especially the young ones? What lessons can they learn from his style, his politics, him being a statesman of all of all time?
I think
Maybe
David
David
is
is
back.
back.
You can say.
David, can you David, can you hear us? Oh, okay,
I think
Vincent.
he has a problem. So I would say I would go back to what I mentioned. I think one of the things that maybe younger people can learn from Raila Odinga was a level of his humility. He's a person, when you met him, he had a level of humility that you cannot associate with a person with his power and wealth. Also, Raila, as I mentioned, is a person who didn't seem to hold a grudge, at least not forever. Even if you disagreed bitterly and you seemed like you will never talk, you may call him all sorts of names. Raila, over time, had a way of actually meeting his enemies, reconciling, and he will act as if nothing ever happened. So I think that's something that people can learn over time. That just because you disagree bitterly on the political space, it doesn't mean we cannot come together and talk and be friends and be brothers. That's why if you look around, I don't think he has never had any permanent enemy at any time. There have been enemies at some point, and then he manages to get them closer and they become friends. That's one of the things, but also his tenacity. I think he has been one of the most persistent person, very patient person. He has worked in the political space for so many decades, hoping to become president. He never became president, but he never stopped, and he was never broken. He was never broken just because he felt, let's say, he has been denied the victory. Some people would be totally destroyed. So I think the lesson it creates is that you can stay positive, you can always be hopeful, you can persist, and you can still maintain your sanity, even in the midst of great disappointment, even in the midst of a lot of frustration which has gone through. And perhaps that is a lesson somebody can apply in other areas of life, whether it is the jobs that we do and everything that people have gone through. They can learn a lot from a person like Raila.
Well, it looks like we've David. Okay, David is off. We've run out of time. Thank you so much, Vincent Makori and David Ohito. Thank you so much. David, are you still there? You have the last word. David, are you there? You have the last word. Okay, it looks like David can't hear us. Okay,
I can't hear anything.
On that note, we want to thank you all for tuning in to this special on the passing of Raila Odinga. Share your thoughts and comments in the comment section below, and tell us what you think about the passing of Raila Odinga, what his legacy is. And of course, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to Paul Ndiho on Substack, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Spotify. Stay tuned for this continuing coverage on this platform. And for now, let's say goodbye to you. I'll probably be coming up with another segment, maybe tomorrow, about the passing of Raila Odinga. For now, take care. Okay, guys, stick around for a minute. I'm gonna finish.